happening, everybody? Hope everybody's having a fantastic Saturday. If you're watching this, chances are your Saturday did not quite go as it had been planned. Boosted Hemi's in, saying, is this thing on? I like it already. So here's the thing, just getting back from the gym. If I start sweating or whatever, it's because I'm still about like 10 minutes, 12 minutes, I guess, outside of being there. So didn't realize what time it was. Cheers, everybody. So it is the Saturday before Christmas. All of the primos and TOs are probably just about drunk by now. Interesting conversations are probably beginning to take place, and the police will soon be called to your place of residence. At least that's how it will be if it was a little bit like mine growing up. So anyway, hope everybody's having a fantastic evening. Basically, let me get this chair sorted out here. Bring you guys up to speed. It has been raining, unfortunately. So getting any useful data on Little Miss Revlon is practically non-existent, or at least the conditions have allowed it to be practically non-existent. We've had a little bit of a bipolar rain events down here. Wayne. Anyway, it's either 30 degrees or 60 degrees. And if you live in an area where your weather tends to do that, then it'll rain like crazy. Then it's a beautiful day the next 2 days. And it rains like hell and then, rinse and repeat. So basically, that's what we're up to down here. Haven't had a chance to get the car out. Was going through the tune, just kind of eyeballing some things. Maybe a couple of things I might change, but even after going through and looking at it, I just don't see a lot of reason to go in and change too much. You start getting greedy, start second guessing yourself. Last time the car was at the drag strip, she did fantastic. I fixed a couple of things on the 4.5 and 5.6 shifts, so she seems a whole lot happier than where it was before. So just getting her ready. January 9th is the big day. So prayers for weather, prayers for good DA and clear skies. But anyway, so basically I'm going to leave it wide open for you guys. Whatever you guys want to chat about, I am all about you guys today. So Speed Freaks checking in, saying good evening from New Jersey. Hope everything's going out well out there. Mike Coleon got the arm flex. I like it. Slash saying, what's up? Got the fist bump. Crypto's checking in saying, hey guys, what's up, Crypt? So, questions that I've been getting a lot lately, it's really not a year in review. I don't do too many of those, but if I were, the biggest question that I have, camshaft stuff. A lot of questions about camshafts, what camshaft profiles work, what cams would I recommend? Do I recommend cams for Hemis? Do I recommend cams for Hellcats? What's kind of a go-to cam profile for Hemis, all kinds of stuff like that. So basically, if I were to walk you through how most of the questions have gone, a lot of folks have been looking at camshafts, which kind of makes sense. These cars are starting to get a little bit of age on them. These cars are coming up on the second-hand and even the third-hand market now, and a lot of guys are starting to pick them up fairly inexpensively. The 15s are really the ones to look out for. The Nag 1 cars are getting cheaper and cheaper, but the 8-speed cars are actually what guys are going to be gunning for. And again, as those become less and less expensive, more guys are picking them up and they're hot rodding them. It's funny, when the question of camshafts comes up, it's really hard to give an answer that doesn't basically just say, go like this. Do you want it to hit pretty hard? Do you want it to sound really good? Give Dr. Diff a call, throw the Joker camshaft in the thing and just call it good. That's basically the way that conversation goes at this point. The camshafts, as far as what works and what really doesn't work for the 5.7s, the focus is getting a lot more narrow on those engines. And what a lot of guys are looking for in those cars is really more of a hot rod sound and a hot rod feel. So anyway, I've got a couple of grinds that are pretty good for 5.7s, but that grind seems to be the best, and a lot of guys seem to like it a lot. There are grinds for guys that just want a little bit less total power, but a little bit more maybe average power, but that seems to be the go-to camshaft. So that seems to be a pretty successful deal for 2020. Let's see, Speed Freak saying, seen a shakeup between tuners and builders last week with some holes and blocks. As you said, if you can't afford to replace the motor, don't play the game. Guys, I've been saying this for a long time. So that's another good point, by the way. A close second is, when people say or ask, what is the best? What can I get away with, basically, is what they're aiming for. And the reality is nothing. When it comes to modifying these modern engines, doesn't matter if it's an LS, a Coyote, a Hemi, all of that. Let me tell you something, guys. There is no bulletproof combination. There's only combinations that work for an amount of time. And on the time scales that these engines can fail if they're built incorrectly or just flat out abused, the time scale isn't really all that relative. Somebody going out beating the hell out of a Coyote, it's going to fail just as fast, maybe, 4 or 5 more donuts faster than or slower than, say, a 5.7 does. Anyway, you get the idea. I've seen bone stock versions of all of these engines fail. So there's that. Even the seemingly bomb-proof LS3, I've seen one fail on the dyno just in a mild configuration. You see them fail all the time just running around, especially guys that are road racing these things. So, again, this is a very expensive game to play. And if you don't have the cash on hand to put into one of these things, you might want to consider just leaving it stock or just sticking with the mild stuff and let the guys with either deeper pockets or more money than they have sense, maybe, let them throw the cash at the car, because one thing that will invariably pop back up is guys that are modifying their dailies. And guys, I can't tell you how bad of an idea that can wind up being, especially if and when there is a catastrophic failure. If you're out beating the living hell out of it and it fails, it's your dime that's going to be covering the cost of that. And it sucks too, because, everybody wants to have fun. Nobody's really going out and doing anything bad. Nobody's really getting hurt. But the reality is that if you're out beating the hell out of your car and it breaks, are you going to be mad that it broke if you're out there beating on it? Think about that for a minute. My favorite thing that used to come back was blaming the tuner. I mean, you've got thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars worth of parts on the car. The tuner puts a fairly mild tune in it. Somebody goes out and beats on it, basically like they're playing a video game, and it breaks, and it's the tuner's fault. Oh, God. And believe me, there's a lot of tattletales that'll show what somebody's been up to with an engine. And you start tearing the thing apart, and you just basically stop dead in your tracks, call the guy up and go, dude, you beat the living hell out of this thing. There is no warranty. Come fetch your pile of shit. So anyway, if you're going to hot rod your car, do yourself a favor. Buy yourself a cash car. Get something that's like $3,000 or $5,000. Save up for half a year if you have to. But save up your money. Buy yourself something that is just reliable transportation. An old Accord, some RAV4, some contraption that is going to get you to work and get you home safely. And then take whatever money you have after that and throw that into your car. And if you frag the car, then it can sit. It doesn't matter. You're still going back and forth to work. Ahmed's asking, what do you think about catless for 5.7 Hemi? A lot of people do it here, and they say they see decent gains with a tune. No, they don't. They only see the gains from the tune. Revlon, stock catalytic converters, ran a 1016, 1017, 1019, ran 1020s in 0 DA at about 134, 135 miles per hour. You don't need different catalytic converters. The tune, yes, you do, but you don't necessarily need cats. Now, where cat delete can help you is the fact that you won't have to worry about your catalytic converters failing. If you're really beating the hell out of it, like I was just talking about, catalytic converters can fail, and you start getting into some real high catalytic converter temps for long durations, you can hurt them. So there's that. But the reality is that you, based on the power that you're making, you're not going to generate enough heat to actually get your cats into cat over temp. See, there's a table in your tune that when your catalytic converter is a derived calculation, it's not an actual thermometer sticking in there. It's a derived calculation. And when it thinks that those cats are getting too hot, it'll start throwing fuel at it in an effort to cool them off a little bit. Your engine doesn't really make enough power unless you're just doing like wide open runs for miles. You're not going to get to a temperature that will really set that table off anyway. So your stock cats flow just fine. Don't worry about removing them. I wouldn't spend the money unless you just want the sound. And then in that case, yeah, it'll be a little bit louder. But if you go back and watch the videos of my 392 and me removing the cats, I was left a little bit surprised, to be honest with you, about how much of a not difference there was with taking the cats off in terms of sound. I mean, you could kind of hear a difference with the windows down, but you really couldn't hear a difference with the windows up. Let's see. Cody's asking, did I see the Black Ghost YouTube video about a 70 triple back 426? Didn't see anything about that. Peter McLeod's asking, do you think that Joker cam would be good for my 2019 Scat Pack? So the Joker cam is a 5.7 specific camshaft. It works really well, naturally aspirated, but I originally designed it to be a nitrous grind. It just happens to do really well for a 5.7 naturally aspirated. It's about as aggressive as I would want to put a 5.7 on the street. I could play around with the lobe separation angle. I could probably tighten it up, maybe bring duration down a little bit. It would be a little bit snappier cam, but it in general makes good power for the 5.7s. For your car, no, I've got 3 different grinds for a 392, and it's kind of mild to wild. It's not to say good, better, best. It is not that. It's my sniper cam or sniper grind, my Warlock, and then the high roller. The sniper grind is going to be very similar to what is in that white Charger, Quick Bricks car. And the idea behind that car, that's the original cam that I put together for the 392s. And it was my personal grind. That cam was going to go in Shalandra. And the idea was that I just wanted to make power with it. I didn't care about a lope. I didn't even think about sound. It was just, what does the math dictate that I can get away with? And like, there's like the math on it. And then there's some kind of Kentucky windage that goes into this, as far as what I can get away with that intake manifold. And it was the intake manifold that was giving me so much grief when I was putting that thing together. So after looking at the stock cam specs, came up with the sniper grind. It doesn't lope, makes good power above, well, it makes power everywhere. In fact, it makes so much power down low that his car exceeded the torque limit tables on the engine and on the transmission side of the tune. I had to go in. So this is kind of funny. It was data logging his car at the drag strip, kind of real-time data logging, so to speak. Whenever I can, I'll remote into the computer and just take a look at data logs, or he'll email back and forth. And I was looking at it, and from your guys' point of view, the timing table came up and then it flatlined. And then at about 3,600 RPM, it threw all the timing back in it. It was hovering at like 3.5 degrees of timing for about a full 1.5 seconds. And I'm looking at this thing going, what the? And then I called Alex over at Pikes Performance News, Alex Pikes, and I said, hey man, I need some help. So I'm trying to figure out what this thing is doing, not even thinking that this car with that cam would have exceeded those torque limits. He goes, yeah, you need to just go in and read out, you know, fast slope, or fast slope, slow slope. I can't remember some of the, you know, obscure stuff. And I went in and looked at it, and what it is basically, it'll tell you why, or rather it'll tell you where it's pulling timing, or if something outside of normal is happening, it'll tell you what it's referencing. So in other words, you always monitor your throttle source, and that'll say pedal. And then slow path was saying none, everything's cool. But then everything was cool. And then he went to watt, and it just said trans. And I went, you've got to be kidding. I mean, just like that, I knew exactly what it was. And so I went hunting for this torque limiter. And sure enough, back in the bottom basement section of the freaking table, back in the sales section, is this freaking torque table, you know, the torque limiter table. And I had forgotten all about it. And by the way, it's these tables, the 2 that I changed, the torque limiting tables that I was playing around with Revlon. when I figured out why the Demons were able to cut such crazy 60 foots, and also why they were snapping rear ends left and right too. And so anyway, I went, oh damn, I can't even believe this thing is doing it. Went in, ramped up all the limits, and that car pulled a 157 60 foot. And that's a 4,650 pound combination. So anyway, getting back to that's that cam for you. I mean, it makes power everywhere. And when folks were talking about, oh, it only made 30 more horsepower, it's like, dude, first of all, it made 30 horsepower on a car that was already making another 30 horsepower over stock. In total, from stock to where that car is now, it's making about 60, 65 more horsepower than what it was. But man, it's making power everywhere. I mean, everywhere. In fact, it's a solid, depending on how you run the math back. I mean, it's close to 600 horsepower at the flywheel. So there's that. At least that's the equivalent. The 8-speed can kind of screw those numbers up, but it gives you an idea of how it gets down the track and the mile an hour that it's able to cover. The Warlock has yet to be tested. That's kind of an intermediate cam. A little bit more intake duration, a little bit more exhaust duration. It's basically the Sniper. It's like Sniper Plus. It's there to give a little bit more theater. It'll pick up a little bit more on the big end, but it will give up a little bit down low. And then there's the High Roller, which that is basically just throwing everything to the wind and making that thing scream on the big end as best as possible. The High Roller is about as aggressive as I'll go for a street driven car. You're gonna start running into tuning issues, and it's gonna end up being a real pain in the ass to get the thing actually set up and tuned right. With even the High Roller can be a bit of a challenge, but Justin over at Dr. Differential, he's got that all figured out. But any more than that, and you're going to start running into some pretty significant issues. So, you know, idling and things like that are going to start to get a little bit rough. So, not just lopey, but rough. So, but let's see. Let's see. Oh, Cody's still talking about that. Yeah, I didn't ever see it. Slash is asking, slowly modding my Charger Scat Pack. What do you think of the Demon Springs? Will they do me any good combined with the 305 ET Street R? Will those springs make my tires rub? If it's the actual Demon Spring, I don't think that they would. I know the Carlisle Springs are a little bit, will actually lower the car a little bit. The Demon Springs, though, at your power level, man, I just don't see them being all that worth it. I'm not running them on Revlon. And Rob's not running them on his car. Like I say, he just got through dropping a 157 60 foot. I don't really see them helping you too much. Where they really start to help is when you're hammering that car with a lot of torque. So in other words, if you were to go in and even if you did go in and ramp up all your torque limits and you're making significantly more power, I just don't think it's going to help you too much. So I'll just leave it at that. The spring rate and everything else is going to be softer, so it's going to ride smoother. I'll tell you that. The Demon Springs, again, will bring the car up a little bit, but the Carlisles will lower the car. I don't know if it'll rub. You're a Charger, so the chances of 305s rubbing are pretty slim. There's actually a little bit more room back there. So, but yeah, ET Street R and 305s are not going to rub at all. Actually, now that I'm reading this. So you should be in pretty good shape there. Let's see. Oh, Crypto's just checking in with that video. No, I haven't seen that, man. I need to look for it. Let's see. Oh, Xcash is saying, I played the Mod Your Daily game. I ended up not being able to see my family that Christmas because they live far away. Yep, that's one of the problems you run into, man. Let's see. John is saying it's a very common problem on the 3.5 V6 for the oil cooler to plug up, causing no heat when idling. I've never heard of that one before. But that sucks if that's what's going on. No heat. The oil cooler plugs up. It should be the heater core. That gets heat from the coolant system. But anyway, Cody's saying, oh, he's still hanging out with that deal, or T-stat. Yeah. Yeah, the thermostat is what would basically, usually when they fail open in those cars. Dr. Div saying, what up, B? What up, Doc? Let's see. Oh, Cody's still talking about that show. Let's see. Oh, so's asking, how high of lift on a cam can you go with stock heads not ported or polished on a 5.7? Well, porting and polishing isn't going to get you any more clearance, valve clearance. But it depends on the actual valve events themselves. So if you, hang on just a second. Bear with me. I want this thing scroll. Come on. It really has more to do with the valve events themselves. I mean, you can overly advance the cam and have a much lower lift, have piston valve issues. But walking around, most guys won't go above 600 lift on the Hemis, mainly because when you're throwing big valves around like that, you run into issues with valve control. So then you have to run into significantly stiffer springs, and there's a lot that comes with that. Push rods, everything else is going to come into play. So there's not really a max lift. There's just more kind of a customary lift that you would go with, but I wouldn't go more than about 605 personally on the intake side. And depending on the profile of the cam, you can go above 600 lift on the exhaust, but it typically doesn't really do any good to go that much higher than about 560, 570, believe it or not, on the exhaust. Chuck Rice saying, hello, B. Let's see. Riv's saying, since I put my cat on E85, it seems to be quieter, definitely on cold startup, and when revving it, is this common? Yes, it is. It's common because it is a significantly richer mixture. You got a lot more mass in there. Basically, you're pumping more fuel or exhaust mass out of your exhaust, which is going to help to muffle it just a little bit. But yeah, the richer mixture will always be a little bit quieter. Riv's saying, what up, B? What up, Riv? Y'all guys saying, what up, B? Got peace out. What's up, man? Let's see. Cal's asking, why does a Mustang GT with a Roush supercharger only run slightly faster quarter mile times than a Scat Pack? So the problem, damn skeeters, the problem with the Roush supercharged Mustangs, if it's an older one, it's not making it's making more power, don't get me wrong, but it's, there are a lot of, I'm just going to stop right here. There's a lot of nannies in the Roush protocol. So many nannies, in fact, that for that car to make that power, everything in the world has to be aligning in the favor of the car. It is funny. It's got a ton of different heat nannies. It is real quick to throw fuel at it, real quick to strip timing. So that's mainly that's the main reason why. I mean, you'll get that power on a quick hit from a roll or something like that. But if I'm being totally honest, the Roush cars, I mean, if it's a 700 horsepower car, I would say that the real number on that's probably, you know, if you're going to the track a lot, beating the hell out of it, probably more like 6 1/4. And then from there, it's just tire combination, weight reduction, and everything else. They're still extremely fast cars, but I mean, we've seen them on the dyno, and it's just, they don't dyno real well. And again, a lot of it has to do with all the nannies, and you can't really blame them for it. I mean, they're doing everything they can to get you more power, but at the same time, make it very safe and streetable and everything else. Also, tuning a Roush Mustang is a train wreck. It's easier just to reflash the computer to stock and start from there because it's got more encryptions. I mean, I think it's easier to break into, you know, some kind of, you know, security vault safe system than it is to mess with those things. So just reflash it to stock and go from there. Oh, Dr. Div saying that the high roller worked well with the VVT still active. That's true. High roller is a really good cam for the 392. It offers a lot of theater, makes a lot of power. So it just depends really on what you're going for. There's a lot of folks that really aren't into a real choppy lope. And the high rollers got a lot of lope to it. The big deal though is, again, if you're just not looking for that, there are alternatives. The other thing is that, dude, it gets a little old after a while, to be honest. I mean, yeah, it's cool in the beginning and it can be cool for a couple of years, but at some point, you know, you might maybe want to have a little bit more of a refined feel to it. And that's really where the Sniper comes into play. That cam is going to make the car simply feel like the engine is bigger all the way around. So, and like I say, the proof's in the pudding. Quick Break just went a 157 60 foot in a 4,600 pound car. So, you know, that's the main takeaway there. Chuck's asking, what is the point of a throttle governor from the factory? What you're probably talking about is just the throttle mapping itself. The governor that you're speaking of is torque limiters that, based on throttle actuation, will only allow a specific amount of torque to be applied up to a certain RPM. And anything less than that, it'll start yanking timing and everything to ensure that that thing is under that torque level. There's a bunch of reasons why. Number one, it's an electronic throttle. And the throttle map itself, you'd be surprised how many weird things go into a throttle map. You've got driver command torque, which is basically a fancy way of saying pedal sensitivity. But what you have to realize is that these modern cars, you don't have a one-to-one or even a cammed throttle map, so to speak. There's a lot that goes into it. And the reason why there's a lot that goes into it is there's an aspect of these electronic throttles that, when you remove all of the nannies, will basically turn it into a light switch. I did that with Revlon. So what had happened was I was playing around with the stock Demon operating system. And one of the funny things is that it will throw max torque at it basically at any RPM. It doesn't matter what the RPM is, it just maxes the table out. Well, let's say you're rolling into the throttle, and you're after, let's say it's revving to 2,200 RPM in between shifts. You roll into the throttle just a little bit more, that throttle is going to kick open whatever the percentage amount is there. So if you're able to maximize your torque on that table, it's just going to go flick, and it's going to flick that thing open real fast, and it's going to basically make the throttle act like a light switch. So you'd be cruising along, and then it's, and it just takes off. Sounds fun, and it is, provided there's nobody directly in front of you. And you can work with it, and you can, modulate it. It's not like you can't do that, but there's a lot that goes into it, right? So the reason why you have those governors is to ensure the thing will launch properly, that it's going to be drivable, which is the main thing. Because you got to remember, these modern engines, they're making a lot of power. They're making a whole lot more power than I think a lot of people even realize. And again, with that, a cam that looks a lot like the Sniper cam, Rob's car, again, is making what would correct out to be a 600 horsepower to the flywheel combination. In other words, running 121 miles per hour in the quarter mile at 4,650 pounds, naturally aspirated, you back math that thing on any calculator, it's going to say you're making about 600 horsepower. So, just think of it that way. Plus, it's an engine that's making all this power down low as well. So it's going to act like a freaking light switch is the reason why there's all those nannies. So, let's see. Cap's Cat saying, what's happening, Professor Mason? What's up, man? Got the arm flex. I like it. Got the ball guy with the shades. Let's see. Oh, Crypto Cat's talking about Woodward is always entertaining when it's warm out. For street, it's a little more private for late night fun. Let's see. John's saying, yeah, the coolant runs through the oil cooler. Yes, it does. It runs through the oil cooler on all of them. That's how they cool the oil, which is kind of strange. It's not a standalone, but it's a V6, so that's a V6 problem. Kevin saying, hey, what up, Mason? What's up, man? John's, let's see. Both my heater hose get hot, so I don't think it's the heater core. It's an 07 Charger. Yeah, if you've got an issue with a thermostat or an issue with that oil cooler, I would certainly get that fixed. Speedfreak's asking, does every Challenger Scat Pack with a 392 have the 309 gear standard from the factory? Yes, they all do. And it is also all true track, positive traction. Let's see. Chuck's asking, so my 2020 RT Plus shaker has a complex throttle map? Yes, it does. All of them do. Any vehicle with an electric throttle or an electronic throttle has those nannies, if you will, employed. And there's other reasons for that. There are limiting factors for the transmission itself. Basically, it's limiting the amount of torque to save transmission bits or to save drive shaft, rear end bits, things like that. All of those are there, for a reason. And again, if you max out all of those tables, what'll end up happening, and you can go into even the driver command torque and make that curve as aggressive as you want. But here's what they do. So a modern electronic throttle, what it's basically doing is it's trying to give your foot more or less a very linear curve, like what will play out in your head as a very linear curve from your point of view. You give it a little bit of throttle, you get a little bit of acceleration, and then it would level out. If you maintain that throttle, it'll come up and then it'll level and then it'll stay there. In other words, you keep your foot on the throttle, it doesn't just keep accelerating at that rate. It doesn't keep opening the throttle, right? But the other side of it that it does is if you were to take your foot and roll into the throttle, let's call this, let's pretend like the gas pedal just sits straight up and down. In the programming, it's programming it to give you 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, 50% at 45-degree angle, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. So we're going to pretend like you have a 90 degrees of pedal throw, just so you can it'll give you a good understanding of what's going on in the throttle map itself. In a vehicle with a cable throttle, something like Foxy over here, when I give and keep in mind, we're talking about the pedal. We were just talking about the pedal. Percentages of acceleration, percentages of power delivery. That's why it's called driver command torque, what you're commanding the engine to produce. So with this car, it's completely different because it has a cable actuated throttle. Now we're going to talk about throttle opening. We're going to do the same exact thing. Throttle right here is closed. Throttle right here would be wide open, right? So throttle closed, throttle wide open. This is totally closed. When I put my foot into the throttle and I crack the throttle this much, this area right here represents now 100% of that throttle's opening from my foot, right? But as far as a partial throttle opening. But that partial throttle, let's call that 20% with an electronic throttle, that amount of opening could produce 40% of the torque that engine can make at that RPM. So as you may imagine, you open it another 20%, that's only 50% more power than you had at your initial 20%, if that makes any sense. So what ends up happening is that the difference with the amount of throttle opening becomes less and less and less. In other words, you open it up another third, then anything you open it down here, so you're not going to even notice or feel a power difference. So that's why the throttle maps are what they are. You give the throttle 20% of a throttle opening, but the throttle may only go boop, like that. And then you give it a little bit more, get that 40%, and it might just go boop, just a little bit more. And it won't go wide open until you slam that throttle all the way open and driver command torque goes, okay, this guy wants everything. And even then it's going to ramp that throttle blade open. So let's say this is your foot goes to the floor and it might go like this. And again, that's just how the computer is feeding the power into that engine. Again, it's going to save transmission bits and everything else. So there may be a delay with that thing going to wide open, but if it just flashed over to wide open, it would, with the amount of power that these cars make today, it would be pretty brutal, and it's already pretty brutal as it is. So hopefully that can kind of help to explain why there's so much and so many different things to look at when it comes to just driver command torque. And it's easy to see it on a data log. From y'all's point of view, my TPS, I can slam the throttle open in this car, but it'll actually come up, arc over, and then come straight up and then tabletop. And it doesn't hurt the amount of acceleration or 60-foot times or anything like that too much. There might be half a tenth in there to play with, because again, this is happening really fast too. It's also, by the way, let me kind of a sidetrack here, sidebar on this. It's easy to look at a data log and go, look, this thing's taking forever to get to wide, but when you play it out, it goes ding, ding, and it's wide open, right? So it's a good way to illustrate what's actually going on in that computer. So I know that was kind of long-winded, a little bit kind of choppy explanation, but there's a lot going on in the computer that is saving your transmission, saving your tires, keeping you from the thing accidentally going wide open or you're throwing too much throttle at it. All that is real easy to do. And the other thing too, by the way, your transmission has a lot to do with this. Not that you're saving the transmission from anything. A lot of these new transmissions are extremely robust. But what you have to remember is that these modern transmissions have got a lot of gear reduction in them. Your first gear is a 471. That is equivalent of having like 456 gears in something with a turbo 400 or a 727, just like the old 3-speed automatics. So if you had a normal throttle map and you were to, just give it like a third throttle, that would be equivalent to having one of those old school setups with 456 gears. If you did have the same equivalent map of a naturally aspirated car, it would freaking light the tires up out of nowhere. So that's the other side of it. It's literally to make the thing much more drivable with the much higher torque at the rear axles that these things are making today. Let's see. Ahmed's asking, what do you think of installing 6.4 stock headers on the 5.7 Hemi Charger along with the 6.4 cam? I see guys reaching nearly 390 horsepower with that mod. Look, it's not a bad way to go. The only downside to it is you're going to be shackled with the same power band that the 392 has, except in a 5.7. I would prefer to see a cam with a much tighter LSA, lobe separation angle, and put some long tubes on it and make the thing act like it's really got a cam in it. The issue with the 392 cam in a 5.7 is that they are still going to be a little bit soft down low. Even if you throw all the advance in the world at that thing, it's still going to be kind of soft because it's a wide lobe separation angle that's trying to make power way out on the big end. It doesn't really work as well. And 390 to the rear wheels isn't super awesome considering that, and this is on a real, that would be on a real nice dyno jet. I'll put it to you like this. Most cammed 5.7s on that Mustang dyno would make about 363, maybe 370 horsepower to the rear wheels. But a cammed 5.7 is going to do really well to make somewhere around 400 to the rear wheels on any dyno. So I know that the Joker cam is done at least that well in a truck. So heavier rotating mass and all that aside, and you get some theater to go along with it. Plus it's going to pull better on the big end. So I know there's guys that have gotten away with it that, it's supposed to be a cheap mod and all that, but dude, if I'm tearing a car apart like that, I ain't putting stock parts in it. And again, I know some guys have gotten some pretty decent results out of it, but to me, I think it's just a little bit too wide of an LSA. Some will argue that it's just as good though, because you can play with the sweep on the cam and all that. Yeah, maybe, but I mean, you're going to need to be running that 6.4 manifold on that car also to really get the most out of it. So just my 2 cents, man. If you're going to do it, do it with something that's really going to make some significantly more power. Johnny was saying, hello, Mr. Mason. Glad I caught tonight's show. Glad you made it here. John Smith saying, can you bypass the oil cooler I think that you might be able to. In fact, you may be able to remove it entirely. I think there might be a block off plate that you might be able to find, but I would not do that personally. I would replace that oil cooler. Jimmy saying hits a 245 tires weakest link, not under warranty. Yeah, 245 tires just light up. That's the fun part about them. Modern Red saying, what up, Professor Mason? Got the arm flex. I like it. B Trump saying, I'm just trying to get a Kenny Bell supercharger for my 2019 Durango RT. You can definitely do that. Thing will run good too. I used to do Whipples on the Durango RTs. And man, those were a lot of fun. They ran good. They're so nice to ride around in too. Let's see. That 392 saying, I have consistently run 1180s in the heat of the summertime, mini tracks on my stock Scat Challenger, put down 432 wheel horsepower. How much power would a ported throttle body, ported intake, and 85 add on average? Well, it depends on the shape of your intake. Most of the time, they'll pick up around 6 to 8 horsepower. Picks up some torque down low. So, but again, it depends on the shape of the intake. So what I try to tell folks is porting the intake is basically blueprinting the intake. When I've had those things on my workbench, I can tell you this, man, I've seen them in crazy bad shape. Lots of casting flash, lots of issues, lots of ledging, lots of core shift where you have, these 3 pieces that are all over the place. I've seen them in that shape. I've seen them look really clean also, with just a little bit of ledging and nothing really too major going on with them. To open them up this is for the Scat Pack cars, 392 guys, to open them up to where they'll actually work with an 84, 85 millimeter throttle body does take some work on the throat. That's typically where you'll see the best gains is opening up that throat and actually making it to where the thing is it kind of drops down and turns to the right. There's some short side radiuses that are just brutal. You got to really get in there and open them up, and it just takes a while when you're cutting it so that it looks clean and you're not burning the polymer up and anything like that when you're going in there and porting them. So again, it just depends on the casting that you've got. Here's the other thing. Some intake manifolds, it's kind of weird how this works out, but some intake manifolds, just the holes are bigger or smaller. I mean, it's just, again, these things are cast, they're polymer. You would think that it would just be the same thing over and over and over again. They're not. As far as which ones are the worst, they make a lot more 5.7s, and those are typically, there's more variation with the 5.7 manifolds than anything else. But the earlier 6.4s were all over the board. In fact, the intake manifold that's on Quick Brick's car is my old manifold, and that manifold had so much core shift that I'm actually kind of surprised that it would have even passed if you were to look at it and see it through my eyes, you would go, how did this thing even get through QC? But anyway, that one was shifted to the back quite a bit. Just goofy stuff. But anyway, that's kind of the long way of saying, you're blueprinting the thing, and 6, 8 horsepower maybe at the most. The most I've ever gotten is 13, and that was on a manifold that looked like ass. Like, this is one that shouldn't have passed. It had a ton. In fact, it was that intake. It had a ton of casting flash. I had to do a lot of reshaping on the throat to get it to even flow halfway decent. I mean, that thing was junk. But I was able to make it flow. So anyway, that's kind of it in a nutshell. Here's the funny thing though. Regardless of what they seem to pick up at the drag strip, or I'm sorry, on a dyno, it's funny how Hemis work, because I think Hemi horses are just bigger or faster or whatever, because it's weird how 6 or 8 horsepower makes such a big difference. Let me put things into perspective for you. My car, Shalandra, a lot of folks will call me out on this, and I think it's hysterical, but it's 100% true. That car, bone stock, made 415 horsepower to the rear wheels on a Mustang dyno. After a tune, cat delete, basically everything in the world thrown at it, that car made 400, and I think the best it ever made was 432, but on average it'd make like 428. So it really didn't pick up a whole lot of horsepower. But on the drag strip, and this is really before there was a lot of trans tuning available, that car went from running, you know, kind of like your car, 11.8, 11.9 to 11.5s. So there was a lot more going on in the tune than just the, you know, the extra power itself. And part of that is that I'd cleaned up the intake. I didn't really port it, but I'd cleaned it up a little bit. So anyway, just some food for thought. Let's see. Oh, also adding E. So here's the thing on the old Kern, Echo Ocho Cinco. So here's the thing, man. It's hard to say what you'll really get out of the E85. You'll pick up some torque down low, but you're not going to pick up a ton of horsepower. And the reason why, a couple of reasons. One, you're only dealing with about 11-to-1 compression, and you're pumping a lot of fuel mass into that thing. It would be better if it had like 12.5 or 13-to-1 compression. The other thing is that the intake manifold that you have, even when the short side runners kick over, it just doesn't have enough flow up there. It just doesn't flow enough. The cam profile doesn't allow for enough high RPM. There's just a lot of things kind of working against it to be efficient on E85 up there. So primarily it's the compression ratio though. Well, that and the intake manifold, there's just a lot going on. So, but it will pick up torque. It'll pick up a significant amount of torque down low. Rip's saying his cat's making 802 foot-pounds and 776 horsepower on E with just a 316 upper and 309 diff. What quarter mile do you think it'll be able to run with it? Well, most of them in that configuration, you should be like a high 970, mid 980 car. In really good air, you know, 10.0s, you know, high 9 should be pretty easy to come by. And that's just me knowing how that combination is going to work. I mean, you're a 316 pulley, which is a big pulley. So you're not going to be making a whole lot more boost, but it puts you in a sweet spot for 85 in a way because, I mean, you're just simply able to throw more timing at it in general. Yeah, 316 is good if you've got questionable E85 as well, provided that you didn't tune it on, you know, just some real trick, really good E85. My suggestion, I mean, if you're on E85, take full advantage of it. And the issue that I see is E85, the more boost you throw at it, the more E85 will be your best friend. So, just anecdotally, I mean, it's not uncommon for a 275 upper car on E85 to be a, you know, a low 980, maybe a high 970 car. You double pulley it. Now you're looking at, you know, somewhere north of like a 960, like a 962, maybe even deep into the 950s in clean air. So 85 will allow you to do a lot of things, but I'm going to caution you, don't get greedy. These are big, heavy cars, and they will keep making power until they pop. And that's kind of the rule of thumb with these modern boosted applications. So, you know, what are the limits? Oh, man, these things will manage and handle, you know, 1,000 horsepower really kind of easily if they're tuned properly on E85. And that would be, you know, a 265 upper with a true ATI 10% lower, you know, those types of combinations where you're really starting to press that 1,000 horsepower to the rear wheels on a dyno jet, somewhere around 900 horsepower to the rear wheels on a Mustang dyno. That's actually like a 255 upper. So you're stretching that 2.4 about as far as it'll go. Yeah, that's stuff you can do on E85 that you simply can't do on race gas. I mean, you can try to get away with it on like Q16 or something like that, but I mean, who's going to spend the money on Q16 when you can get E85 right up the street, right? So again, I would say don't get greedy with the tune. Even though you're running a big pulley, you get a bad tank at E85, which happens, by the way. And I've seen it happen on more than 3 occasions. I mean, 4 or 5 occasions, actually. And you can end up, stinging some stuff if you try to get too aggressive with it. So anyway, Ripta's got the corrected numbers 844 and 818. Yeah, I mean, it's, like I say, it's real common to see them running those numbers. Speedfreak's asking, any difference in the automatic trans from a Scat Pack and Hellcat or both the HP90? I wish they were both HP90s. No, the HP70, which is in the Scat Packs, and then the HP50, which is in the 6-cylinder cars. And yeah, there is a lot of difference between the two. HP70 you'll start to find the limits of an HP70 somewhere around that, about 530 foot-pounds of torque to the rear wheels on a Mustang dyno, somewhere around 570, 580 foot-pounds of torque to the rear wheels on a dyno jet. So that's where you're going to start seeing some limits with that transmission. The HP90, they don't have the limits like that. The only limit to an HP90 is just how aggressive that first gear is. And I can tell you straight away that, that can cause some issues once you start really making a lot of power, but, puts a lot of stress on rear ends and axles and, drive shafts or whatever. But the reality is that the HP90 has got a much higher torque limiting limit than the HP70 does. To give you an idea, so if you take the 70 is just shorthand for 700. That 700 is in Newton meters. To get the foot-pounds of torque, just take the Newton meters, multiply it by about 0.75. Same goes for the HP90. 900 Newton meters, multiply that by about 0.75, and that will give you roughly the torque handling capacity. However, the HP90 is extremely underrated. And I mean extremely underrated. I don't know if the HP50 is underrated per se, but you also have to think of it like this. Those torque numbers, that's what the transmission is rated to. But again, you've got to remember these are a heavy car. So that weight is going to create extra load on the transmissions. Just so happens HP90 doesn't seem to really flinch with that extra load. Not like the HP70 does. So there is a big difference. The HP70 is a little bit shorter, I believe, by just a small amount than the HP90. And my understanding is that the drive shafts you can't put one on the other, but you have to have a specific HP90 drive shaft. Let's see. Chuck's saying, I get it. I do believe following the tachometer sweet spot per gear on my 6-speed maximize the power in the 345. For sure it does. B-Trub saying, Dodge did the game dirty after 2019 with a PCM unlocking. Yeah, you got to have the smart cable. That sucks. Chuck saying, I noticed a better throttle response following your 5,800 RPM recommendations. That is kind of the sweet spot with those cars for sure. Dan's asking, do I have any experience with a Barton shifter on a 6060? Yeah, I've driven a few. I've never installed one, but I have driven a few, and they're awesome shifters. I 100% recommend them. As a matter of fact, when I got the account set up at Pikes with Barton, one of the first things we did was grab a Barton shifter, and they installed it on a 6-speed, well, obviously Challenger. It was a Bravo package. Basically, it was making about 815 to the rear wheels. Man, made the shift real nice in that car, which was actually one of my complaints with the Hellcat. Was just the shifter felt funky. I didn't like it, but that shifter is pretty good. LS Swap shaking it and saying, "Hola, hola, bueno." LS Swap saying, "Still a Mopar boy, I see. Sorry, yeah. Well, Somebody's got to bring class to the mix. Let's see, Robert Medlock saying, hello, is it possible to contact you by email? I have a lengthy question. No, I do not give my emails out. So shoot the question out here. Others would probably like to get an answer on that as well. Crypto saying Barton on a 6060 works fine unless it's lowered and running a drive shaft. Clearance mod required. That may be the case. I never ran into that. Chuck saying my 245s are a blast. They do light up easy. That's one of the fun things about those tires, is that they're a shitload of fun to play with. They do put on a good smoke show. We'll say that. Z's checking in. What's happening, brother? Saying, what's up, Brian? Is it January 9th yet? Man, I tell you what, I have been like freaking fingers crossed, toes crossed, and everything. You know, the weather down here has been nuts. And one of the worst issues down here is just with the weather itself, man. About this time of year, it gets a little bit crazy, and you never really know quite exactly what to expect. It's weird. We've been getting rain about every 4-ish days. And what's funny is that it'll be 30 degrees. It was 30 degrees yesterday, and it's 60 degrees today. It's just driving all of us nuts. But yeah, no kidding. Is it January 9th yet? I am absolutely just freaking cannot wait for it. And it will be a closed track. No spectators, no nothing. Guys that are shooting for records. Don't need a bunch of folks around. Plus, we just don't have the facilities for it. So that is going to be how that event is going to go. Crew only. Driver's meeting is at 8:30. John saying, thanks for asking my questions. Always a great chat. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. LS Swap saying, I'd assume investment molds. Oh, they're probably made in a cheap country where QC just says send it. Yeah, have you ever seen an LS2 manifold? That's how I learned how to port manifolds, by the way. So what's funny is that the LS2 manifolds were so notoriously bad that they would have casting flash that thick all the way around the port. They were awful. I mean, those were like the poster child for terrible quality control. Then they started to get everything figured out. Obviously, the LS3s are really good, but yeah, the early LS2s were junk. They were absolutely garbage. But you go in there and port them and basically make them flow what they're supposed to, and they actually work really well. But yeah, same idea, exact same issue as the LS2 issues, just not quite as bad. But I mean, the problem's still there, and really the 5.7 is the one that is the most annoying. Oh, Captain Scott saying, hey, B, that was my 5.7 that took you 6.5 hours to port. She runs like a dream now. Dr. Diff and yourself did a great job on my Challenger. Glad about that. I'm glad you're stoked with it, man. I'll tell you what. I think, in fact, your manifold, Captain Scott's car is one of the manifolds that it was just kind of a weird manifold, man. That's one of the ones that the throat was actually smaller than normal. It took me forever to port that thing. It took me right at 6.5 hours to actually get the thing cut, working, looking the way that I wanted, to have everything measure out the way that I wanted. Man, and the weird thing about your manifold, by the way, is that it did have some core shift and a lot of ledging. So, I mean, I cut, and I was trying to explain this to Dr. Diff. What was funny about it is I was telling him, man, I was like, dude, I don't think I've ever cut this much material out of any intake manifold that I've ever cut in my life. A lot of times what I'll do is, if I'm thinking about it, as I'm cutting and the material's coming out of it, I'll kind of scoop it up and I'll have this little brick of the material. And it's typically, anyway, there's nothing in here that shows, I could like give you a visual on, but anyway, it's about the size of a hot dog bun, basically. Like if I were just to make a little brick out of it, it's usually about the size of a hot dog bun. That manifold, kid you not, It was bigger. I mean, if I were to take all that stuff out, it'd have been a brick about this wide, about like that, and about that thick, just a powder. I mean, it was just crazy how much material came out of that manifold. So, but yeah, glad you're stoked with it. That thing, like I say, put a lot of love in that manifold, man. I sat back over here, stared at it, you know, and just kept on cutting, but she got there. So that's awesome. Oh, Chuck's saying, Cascade, I bet it runs sweet. I bet it does too, especially after the work we did on that one, man. Blue Streak's asking, hey, B, why is there so much difference in horsepower between the 6.4 car and the 6.4 truck motor? It's all in the manifold. The truck has a variable runner intake manifold, and what that allows that truck manifold to do is to have a long runner intake manifold up to about, you know, 5,000 RPM, and it switches over to a short runner manifold, and that's where the extra power comes from. If you ever look at the power curve, like from your point of view, the car will come up and it'll kind of arc over like that. The truck will come up a little, it'll start higher, come up a little bit higher, and then it'll just arc up, and it kind of keeps carrying the power on the back end. That's really where the truck shines, is in that manifold. In fact, the manifold in the truck, it's not just the fact that it's a short runner or it's a variable runner intake manifold. The ports are larger in the manifolds on the truck. So, I mean, and it's blatantly obvious when you pull the things off and you flip them upside down. And it's one of the reasons why the 6.4 car manifolds can take longer to cut, is because I'm switching back and forth between cartridge rolls to get in there and get the smaller, the radiuses, the outside, or just, you know, where it curves up, it's smaller. So I have to go in there with a smaller cartridge roll and cut those first and get basically get the ears of the ports cut first, and then I'll go in and do the floors short side and long side. So that's the reason for that, though. It's all in the manifold. Camscat saying, yeah, it does. Let's see. Jimmy's hanging out with LS Swap. Let's see. So is saying, I'm running Elbrock Victor 2 intake, long tube headers, Cooks. I'm looking for a decent cam with low to it, but I'll be getting a stall for it. Any suggestions for a cam around the 1300 as a kit? Give Dr. Diff a shout. I don't know what engine you're running, if it's a 5.7 or if it's a 6.4, but we got a cam for you. One of several that will work very well for that combination. Let's see. Kevin's saying, yeah, Mason, that 6.4 cam 390 ain't too great with a full bolt-on 5.7 85. Can be like 370 wheel horsepower. Seen a charger on YouTube making this power, not bad for a stock cam. You know, I'm going to caution folks on throwing dyno numbers around too. I mean, I've seen some nutty numbers flying around. My thing is this. What sucks is that everybody doesn't have a drag strip right down the street from their house. But you can get a draggy and you can get a set of ET Street R's and throw them on your car. So, I'll just say this, man. I've seen a lot of real nutty claims. I've seen a lot of real crazy stuff show up on a dyno, both low and high. And I can tell you guys this, whenever something falls outside of a parameter, you got to kind of raise an eyebrow a little bit, right? But the proof is in the pudding, and get the thing on the track and see what it's going to actually do. But to your point, I would prefer to see, I mean, if you're going to go in and change camshafts, I really wouldn't go with a 392 cam for a 5.7. Again, I would go with something with a much tighter lobe separation angle. Again, with the understanding that, you know, the 392 cam's got 121 or 122 degree lobe separation angle. I think that the cam in the trucks and the cars too is actually a tighter lobe separation angle. I think it's like 118, 117, if memory serves me correctly. The older 6.1 cams were actually like 114. So they had a little bit of a hot rod cam from the factory. Anyway, the point of all of this is just to say that you can get a combination that's going to work really well. It's going to sound good. It's going to run good. You're going to have a hot rod. It's going to do well. And you can make somewhere around 400 horsepower to the rear wheels with a 5.7. And again, I want to just say that that's a 5.7 making that kind of power. It's not 6.4 power. But damn if it ain't close, and it'll wind out the back end really well. And you'll be able to give 6.4s a serious run for their money when you set them up properly. So, just ask Dr. Diff about how that 5.7 with a Joker cam does against a full bolt-on 5th gen Camaro. That's the LS3 everybody's all in love with. Stock cam LS3 full bolt-on got tippy-toed away by this cute little 5.7 Challenger with a cam and a set of headers and an intake port. So, I mean, you tell me what the difference here is. I'd say there's a lot in the equalization of those two things just with that cam. So you might say, throw a cam in the LS3, it walks away from it. Well, that's not what the race was. And besides, that's a 435 horsepower engine to the flywheel versus an engine that's supposed to be making 370, and it makes enough power to walk away from it. So anyway, you get the idea, and a significantly heavier package to boot. LS Swap is saying, yeah, good luck finding a good E85. Yeah, so just remember the MEA spec is E70 to E90. So you can have anything from E70 in the tank, so to speak, to E90. That's why it's extremely important to test your E85 before it's tuned on E85. Know your fuel, because if you don't, you're going to have a bad day. This is where GMs have a significant leg up with their E85, the ability to read E85 and read the content of the fuel. You've got to always remember that the fuel is always going to be your limiting factor with an E85 combination. This is the reason why so many guys will switch over to Ignite E85 when they go to the drag strip, and for good reason. But even if you're just playing around on the street, doing highway pulls and stuff like that, you want to remember that, you start getting those low DAs, you go, man, the car is going to run great. Yeah, that's when the fuel manufacturers and the refineries start cutting the amount of ethanol in the fuel, because the ethanol doesn't want to light off when it's cold. And so because of that, you're going to have a higher gasoline quantity to help the thing fire up with cold starts, which it does, but it kills performance capability. So what we would do in many cases is we would practically drain the tank, but we'd leave about at least 1 or 2 gallons of regular gasoline in the thing and then fill it up with whatever E85 we had. So, and really force the issue on that thing. Oh, Rich saying, yeah, not the best E down here. Oh, LS Swap saying, yeah, he found a place that had E90. There was a lot of places during the summer that were getting real high E numbers down here. John saying, I want to bypass the coolant from going through the oil cooler. Yeah, I'm not sure on that engine if that is something you can do. I'm not sure on that combination. Cal saying, if the future Challenger comes out as a hybrid, can it still be a performance car? Absolutely it could. Could even be better than what it is now if they did it the right way. Crypto saying, a couple of washers between the trans mount and the body. Oh, Chuck saying, could just be Mopar gossip, but I heard that a possible new version of the Hemi Cuda, I guess we will see. Possible. But I don't know yet. I mean, that's something that's been floating around, man, for a long time, and I just don't really see it being a viable thing anytime real soon. I'll tell you what, Riff, I'm going to get back to you real quick. Y'all talk amongst yourselves. I'll be right back. I had too many damn Gatorades. Time out. Hang on. The power of the powdered bath. Okay, I'm back. So, yeah, a lot of folks were talking about that, the CUDA and everything else. So people were thinking that that was going to be hinging on either the Julia platform or the Ghibli platform. And I just don't know if that's actually going to be a thing. And the other side of that argument was going to be, well, what about, are they going to have a hybrid? Are they going to change the direction that they've been going with the Challenger and the Charger? And at one point, you almost got the sense that they were going to do that. They were going to, bring the car down a little bit in size, bring the sophistication up with power plants, whatever. The problem is, I think that FCA figured out pretty quickly that the old Mercedes LX platform does really well for what these cars are marketed to do. And there's just no real good reason to kind of, for lack of a better way of putting it, if it ain't broke, don't fix it type of thing. They're just not going to change anything if the market dictates them to not change it. The market is saying, don't change it. We like what we've got, which is cool, I guess. I'd like to see a little bit more innovation, but I doubt we're going to see a lot. Now the CUDA, again, that was going to be something that could have possibly been the next Halo car. One of my buddies that works for Dodge was telling me about it. He's like, yeah, but don't hold your breath. It's really more a proof of concept than anything else right now. So, could be some hybrid technology in that, by the way. So again, there's a lot of things that are on the table, a lot of innovation that folks are talking about. There's a lot of grumbling going on right now as far as what to do with the next generation of hot rods. Do you stick with the current program and keep making powerful V8, basically old school style hot rods? Or do you start to look at the hybrid, or more importantly, do you start to look at the EV market as a whole for where to go? And this is a question that a lot of guys will really pine over. It wouldn't be a real muscle car. If it were an electric car, it would suck. Fuck electric. Well, here's the thing. There's a lot of folks that are looking at the electric market as the new platform moving forward. And we're talking about timelines of like 2030, 2035, moving a lot of these gasoline powered things over to electric as those platforms get better and better and better. It's not to say that the gasoline and the supercharger and the V8 and all that stuff's going to die. Hardly the case. But there are a lot of folks that are making a pretty solid case that, for those that are only looking for outright performance, electric might be the safer and smarter play for a lot of reasons. I mean, we all know about the instant torque, right? We all know that they're just incredibly fast and do all these amazing things. They're not affected by altitude. In fact, altitude is your best friend if you have an electric car. This is where everybody in Denver or the high desert or anywhere else that you're above 4,000 feet, the air is thinner. So an electric car in that environment is going to be even faster than what it would be at sea level. In fact, sea level would become the new high altitude if you own an electric car, believe it or not. So there's a lot of neat reasons to start looking at electric as the new avenue, so to speak, for a performance vehicle. I get, though, that a lot of folks don't want that. They want the guaranteed range of gasoline and don't want the inconvenience of waiting around for something to charge. Batteries start to turn into a big issue also in terms of recyclability. Do they pollute more? There's so many other things going on with that. So as that debate rolls forward, car manufacturers are starting to take a look at the market as a whole just to see where they can actually fit in. And I got news for you guys. If 0 to 60 numbers, quarter mile numbers, if those are the things that you're looking at, I got news for you. You're not going to mess with an electric vehicle that is set up as a performance vehicle. Handling becomes an incredibly different story once you start moving things to all electric, because you've got torque vectoring on all four corners that is perfectly optimized depending on how your electric setup is. There's so many things you can do that you can't do with a gasoline engine. Again, is it better? It's just different. And I personally think it's the wave of the future once they get the battery technology figured out, realistic ranges sorted out. I think that's really where you're going to start seeing those cars take over. But, you know, it's scary because the issue for me is range anxiety. When it comes to the electric vehicles, range anxiety becomes a major problem, because if you're out beating on the thing and you're like, oh, damn, I need to put some gas in the car, you can just go put gas in the car, right? You can't just go fill her up full of electricities. It doesn't work like that. So, but again, that's an infrastructure issue, and you may be able to let the thing sit on a charger for 5 minutes and get you enough charge to get you home. And then, you know, you're kind of back to square one where you were before. So practical application isn't going to be much different. I don't know. Time will tell. As infrastructure gets better and as battery technology gets better, it's going to become more and more a viable alternative to gasoline. And when you start throwing around torque numbers the way that those electric motors can throw around, man, it makes it a difficult proposition to say no to. You know what I mean? Let's see. Rift is asking, with his build, what kind of power would I pick up porting the snout on his Hellcat? So, man, you might pick up 15 horsepower at the most. And I'm not saying that for effect. I just don't think that it's going to pick up a ton. It's kind of a helper mod. And of course, the harder you're driving the blower, the more you're going to pick up here. So for a stock car, it's absolutely not even worth it. Not even worth even thinking about. For a car with a single pulley, you know, you might pick up 10. Double pulley cars, again, 12, 15-ish. And then if you start getting real aggressive from there, then obviously you might start seeing even higher, better results. But my understanding is that the cost of that is just stupid. It's like prohibitively expensive. So, I mean, dude, unless you're going after a number, like you're like, dude, I want this thing to run a 930, whatever. If you're doing that, and a 930 is a number that you're gunning for, then yeah, that's another thing that you're going to have to do. But that other thing that you're going to have to do is also going to be a different throttle body. Then it comes into tuning, and throttle mapping becomes tough. You talk about a light switch down low. There's a lot of goofy stuff that starts to happen when you start to play with ported snouts, bigger throttle bodies, and the whole bit. I would say that even if you're driving that supercharger with a 265 upper and a 10% lower, that would be about the place where I would start to look for maybe opening up that snout. Aside from that, just get out there and run some mid-nines and have fun with the thing. Chuck saying, I realize Plymouth is done talking about the Cuda. Yeah, no, it would fall under the Dodge brand for sure. Let's see. Robert's saying he's only running 12.5s in a 6.1. It's an 06 Charger cam, Pro Charge, 3000 stall, Tri-5R, 275/40, 20 Cook's headers, HP tuners, TCM tune, BMR trailing arms. What am I doing wrong? Well, I don't know, buddy. Without seeing what you're up to at the track, I can't tell you. What a lot of guys will do, and this is something that I see happen a lot of times, is they'll let the car idle for simply way too long at the drag strip. That could, I don't know what you're doing. Of course, I'm not there with you, but that's something that I see quite a bit. Intake temps go through the roof. The car starts yanking tons of timing. You get to the hot spark table where it starts ripping. I mean, you can rip as much as 4, 5, 6 degrees of timing out of the thing. So that's some areas where you could possibly run into some problems with your car. and why it wouldn't be quite making the power that you're used to making. You've got a Pro Charger. The filter placement on a Pro Charger being basically practically right above a set of headers. Not necessarily the best scenario for consistent performance. But again, that could be another area you're just sucking in some hot air. It's so hard to tell without knowing what you're doing. Also, you didn't put up your mile per hour, so it's kind of hard to get an idea for what's going on. Could be something in the tune. I don't know, buddy. It's a lot going on here, a lot to unpack. So, let's see. So saying it's a 2010 Challenger 5.7. Oh, Robert's saying also have the 306 gate track swap. That's good, by the way. Riff's saying I bought the ID 1050 injectors for new build, but realized that I need some more 1200 or 1300 for the future mods. If I sell the ID 1050s, would it be okay to put the 1200 injectors in and drive it to the shop? Probably, but just keep it out of boost. It's going to want to go rich. I would data log it, take a look at it, make sure that everything's looking good on the way there, but it's going to be pissed. It's definitely going to be running real rich. I don't know how far the drive is to the shop. It's going to be pulling fuel like crazy. I'll put it like this. I never advise that that's a good idea. If you can swap them out that easily, then you can swap them out at the shop and just do it there. I mean, it's not that big of a deal to swap injectors on a Hellcat. So just run it down there, just knock it out in the parking lot and do it that way is what I would suggest that you do. I don't like playing the game of basically having the computer go through freak out mode initially and have it pulling all kinds of fuel out of it. You're going to be resetting adaptives anyway, or your tuner will be resetting adaptives anyway, but still, I just don't recommend it. Not necessarily a good idea. Plus, if for whatever reason you've got to go wide open with the thing, bad things can happen and you just don't want bad things to happen. Crypto's asking, could you give me an idea about horsepower gains with a set of long tube headers, ported blower, 285, 105 throttle body, Demon injectors with supporting mods, 93, 109 mixed 2 gallon. Man, I got to unpack a lot here, buddy. So let me just kind of score you away real quick. First of all, you've already kind of, there's some things that you don't want to do coming into this conversation. First of all, asking about horsepower gains with a set of long tube headers, you don't need them on a Hellcat. So just take that out of the equation straight away. Headers are there. Long tube headers are there to build low speed torque. You have a supercharger on your car to build low speed torque. You don't need them. Not at the 285 level anyway. I mean, we got guys that are running 970s, 980s with 285s on here on 93 octane. So, granted, that's with really good air, but you get the idea. So I wouldn't even bother with that. 105 throttle body, Demon injectors. That's the other thing. Don't run Demon injectors. Just don't. You're going to want to run fuel injector connection 750s in that car. Or a fuel injector connection 1000cc injectors. I would not run Demon injectors. I know you're trying to get away with that with the cost savings, but the issue with those injectors is that they're, for all intents and purposes, non-rebuildable. You can get them from the factory. That's great. But getting those things balanced can be difficult. Same with the Hellcat injectors or any other of the factory injectors. Go with the fuel injector connections or give Keith a shout over at Fuel One and have him get you a set of balanced injectors. And, 750s for your combination would probably be fine, although I'd probably want to take a look at thousands just because there's a lot of, most tuners have solid data on 1000cc injectors. As far as the 93 109 mix, 2 gallons and all of that, man, look, so are you going to tune it? Here's the thing. So that means that you would be tuning it with 2 gallons of MS 109 in the tank, and then you fill the tank up with 93 octane. And every time you put gas in your car, you're going to run it basically completely empty, have your 2 gallons of MS 109, and then have the rest of the tank filled up to the top. Or you're going to mad scientist math the thing down volume wise from there. No, you're not. First of all, a 285 upper is perfectly doable on 93 octane gasoline. If you want to throw some butane or Torco in that thing, just to be on the safe side, you certainly can. But I don't recommend getting into tuning on a mix of fuel. And let me tell you why. If you don't mix it the same way every time, you're not going to get the same result. And you can say, well, I can just throw more 109 in it or 100 in it or what have you. It's a little bit different than just that. And so you want to have a consistent fuel quality on tap. And if you want to throw some 100 octane or 109 in it, just a little bit, I prefer 100 octane, by the way. You want to throw 2 or 3 gallons worth of 100 in the tank, or MS 109 or 260 GT plus, whatever. That's fine. You can do that, but do it as a safety measure. Don't do it as a tuning measure. You're not always going to have that fuel on tap. And if you have to run 93 in the tank and you've got, say, instead of just putting 1 or 2 degrees of timing on the car in certain tables, let's say because of the race gas, you're able to throw 4 degrees of timing. Well, now, even with the mix, now you don't have that knock protection, so you can run into issues with that. It's where data logging, looking at your knock sensor voltage and all of that will really come in handy. Learn how to data log the car and look at these parameters and make sure that you're not running a fuel that's got fuel problems. It happens to happen a lot, by the way. So, in saying all of that, if you want to tune it on race gas, tune it on race gas. A 285 upper loves 100 octane gasoline. So 260 GT be the way I would go. 260 GT plus or MS 109, those are fine. They just have more ethanol in them than the 260 GT. 260 GT is a 10% ethanol fuel, just like what you would get at the pump. It's just that it's mixed with 93 octane as opposed to, the 87 octane as opposed to, a lower grade fuel. Sorry, the E85 is mixed in some cases with 87 octane. LS swaps, distance to the shop plays a big role in that. Yep. Kevin saying, I hear you about the dyno numbers. I'm more after a driver feel starting with long tubes, Borla S-type and 373 gears start here. Now, that's the other thing. I mean, long tubes, you've got the sound and you've got the feel of the long tubes. You will always have better off throttle response, and then tip in throttle response, meaning you're at cruise, you tip into the throttle a little bit. That tip in is going to have an instant hit of torque that's going to be higher than where you're at now. In that case, long tubes are fantastic for NA cars. For positive displacement cars, they don't really help you a lot. All the scavenging is being handled by that supercharger. And so really the long tube can be weirdly a bit of a restriction unless you're going with like a 2-inch tube. And in that case, you might pick up some mid-range or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, it's hard for me to argue the case for long tubes with a positive displacement supercharger engine when we've got cars running mid-9s without them. But again, these are all street cars. You get into the race stuff, it's a whole different can of worms there, to say the least. Rich saying someone's going to get a good deal on some barely used ID 1050s. I know the feeling, buddy. 510's checking in. Rick, you in the Bay Area? I miss San Francisco. I miss my San Bruno, man. See, Rick and 510 are hanging out. LSA, I just want some Utes in America, man. You and me both. I don't know why we never got them. That's the craziest thing. Oh, 510 put that 6.4 in his duster. Very nice. Oh, Rick is talking about the ethanol levels, posting those up. Yeah, I mean, if for no other reason, man, it might be something worth looking at, because you know it'll at least give you an idea for what to expect as far as the spread where you live. Oh, Ellis is saying, yeah, Chevy's talking about making a bunch of new electric vehicles for, you know, the 2023, in up years. Yeah, I mean, man, they're proven to be really good, and people that drive them freaking love them. So, Chuck's saying, when I was at a customer's house the other day, he had 2 Teslas in his garage. What are these cars? They look space age to my old school brain. They're just all electric cars, and you know, they are really, really, really fast. And, you know, you have instant torque. It's an electric motor. So, you know, if it's a 300 horsepower electric motor, it probably makes 700 pound-feet of torque. So, and it's from 0 RPM. Oh, Riv's saying, I've never felt acceleration like I did in a P100D Tesla in ludicrous mode, for sure. Yeah, John saying he saw the Copo Camaro that was all electric, making 1,000 horsepower. Yeah, that thing's making probably 2,000 pound-feet of torque. That thing is crazy. Ellis, so I was talking about Elon. So what's funny is, you know, what a lot of folks know, I used to live in San Francisco, I used to live in the Bay Area, and I lived in San Bruno, which is just south of the city. And so we would take the bikes and we would run down to Blackhawk, make the run up through Alice's and all that, hit Honda on the backside, and, you know, run out through HNB and Pacifica and all that, go to the walk up drive through at the Taco Bell over there. Anyway, we used to have a riot up there. I mean, we were there basically every weekend, and it wasn't uncommon there for a little while. You'd see the old Tesla Roadsters that were the Lotus build cars pulled over on one of the kickoffs with smoking. Basically, they were cooking the speed controllers. Let's see. Real Counterfeit's asking, why is there such a big issue with the 100mm throttle body on Hellcats? A lot of it has to do with tuning just tuning the throttle curve in those things. They can be a bit of a pain in the ass to tune. Robert's saying 12.5 at 115. I take off at idle. If I take off at around 1,500 RPM, I'll actually get a lower time. I run the Tri-5s around 16 to 19 and always having traction issues. Yeah, like I say, it's tough to say. Well, guys, I tell you what, we are just over an hour and a half. I got to get going. I got to get up early in the morning, but I want to thank each and every one of y'all for hanging out with me. We're going to cut it a little bit short this evening, but we will catch up with you guys on the next one. Rip saying, if I can't find good E85, is it okay to use ethanol booster? Yeah, you probably could, but again, I mean, it's introducing different products in with that your E85, so it can be a little bit dicey. I would want to do a little bit or a lot of research to make sure you're getting just the right products. Don't use Torco or anything else like that, though. It's not meant for that. And then, yeah, I asked the tuner what ethanol level was in it if they tested it. And guys, y'all have a great one with that. Stay safe out there. Keep wearing your mask. If not for yourself, then do it for others. If you're going to send it, don't bend it. Keep your shiny side up. Love each and every one of y'all. Can't wait to see you guys on the next one. For more for y'all, we'll be doing this. Y'all have a great one. Adios.